Hi, I'm Paul Guppy. I'm Vice President for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our weekly update on what's going on in Olympia and the issues that we're working on that are important to the people of our state. So let's jump right into the update. This is the third week of the legislative session in Olympia. For those who are keeping count, it is the 20th legislative day out of a planned 105-day session. So we're just right at the beginning. It's also fun for those who are keeping count that our neighbors over in Idaho, the legislature is also in session there. They have a whole 67 bills introduced so far in their session. And over here in Washington state, we have 1,270 bills have been introduced. So there's a big difference in how much enthusiasm there is for introducing bills. We know that the vast majority of the roughly 3,000 bills that will be introduced this year are going to die in committee, but several hundred of them will end up going to the governor's desk, and he'll sign them, and those are the ones that we're tracking. So jumping right into issues, the first one is not even related directly to the legislature. It has to do with the state Supreme Court, and that is this key case on imposing an income tax in our state. We have pointed out obvious research that Jason on our staff has done that an income tax is unconstitutional in our state. The Democrats are working very hard to get that overturned, and there was a hearing last week which we attended. We noticed that virtually all of the data and information that was cited in legal briefs to overturn this unconstitutional income tax bill came directly from our research. Another positive point was the Wall Street Journal editorialized against a state income tax in Washington state. Great publicity for the work that we're doing. And the editorial writer was on the phone several times with Jason to make sure that the Wall Street Journal had all their facts right when they presented this. They came up with the same conclusion. This bill is clearly unconstitutional in our state. However, that doesn't mean we don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do. There appears to be, the hearing went well. Both sides got a fair hearing before the justices. Our president, Mike Gallagher, and our chairman, Kevin Boucher, were attending the hearing along with some of our other policy experts. And it was great to be right there to provide commentary for media as the hearing was going on. The State Labor Council was there because the unions very much want an income tax. So they held your classic rent-a-crowd rally on the steps of the Capitol. There were about 40 people there. You can always tell it's a professional rally because all of the signs were pre-printed signs. My favorite one that was held up was "Stop the Tax Cut," even though this is a tax that hasn't even gone into effect yet. But that's the rhetoric that the unions are using. And so we will see how that comes out. Regarding the hearing itself, one interesting point is there's a technical term, and the court ruled years ago that income is property, that you own your income, and therefore it's subject to the property tax restrictions that are in the Constitution. That's very clear. We think that a tactical move that the left is doing is to try to get the justices to break that idea that you own your property. If they succeed in getting a ruling like that, which again is narrow, technical, it's based on about 100 years of precedent. If they overturn that, the Democrats will rush to tax your income, and it will not be part of the property tax limitation. So we're looking to see if that's technical maneuver is what happens in the courts, and we should get an answer in the next several weeks when they do a ruling. Moving on to other issues, Lee Finna, our education expert, testified on a bill in the Senate Education Committee. This is SB 5248. This was introduced by the Republican leader, Senator Braun. But that's not the reason we supported it. The reason we thought it was a good idea is because this bill would take unused federal COVID funds and devote it directly to tutoring for students to make up for learning loss during the time that the governor had closed the schools. We think that this is obvious. It's driven by information that came from the superintendent of public instruction, who was asked to report on what happened to federal COVID funds that the state received for schools. And legislators learned that 60% of the money that we received went into a category called other. So we have no idea where this money went. So to solve that problem, Senator Braun was to specifically dedicate it to tutoring for students. Leave said that's a good idea. It helps children in our state. And she went further, saying, why pour tutoring money into the existing school districts? Because again, we're not sure how they will actually use it. Why not give the tutoring assistance directly to parents so they can hire tutors or go to Sylvan Learning Center or any other resource that they might be able to use? The chairman of the committee, while Lee was speaking, Senator Wellman, you could see that she was raising her gavel when Lee started to talk about school choice, and was just about to gavel Lee down, because she's like, we're not here to talk about school choice. And Lee wrapped up at that point. And the chairman responded by saying, we don't have vouchers in our state, as if we're never going to have them and we can't have them. Washington Policy Center supports vouchers, but more importantly, we support choice for parents in whatever form that happens. So that was a dramatic moment during the committee, and it just shows the impact that Lee has when she testifies. And next is another couple of bills that we testified on, HB 1301 and 3 companion bills that go with that. These are another issue that we've done a lot of work on, occupational license reform, which sounds technical, but it's very important if a person with training has moved into the state, a young person trying to find a job, and they run right into these permitting barriers. People have to spend thousands of dollars to get permission to take a particular job, hundreds of hours of training. Often military spouses or other families are moving into the state. They're already trained as a pharmacist, a nurse, electrician, technical engineer, any profession like that, culinary arts, and they're not allowed to get a job in Washington state because they don't have a license. So I testified in favor of these bills at the invitation of Representative Chris Corey. It's kind of an interesting moment. We were in meetings in the Capitol, and I'm walking down the hall, and he kind of grabbed me and he said, can you testify on this bill this afternoon? I said, sure. So I showed up and did that. I was the only witness in favor of it, and there was only one against it. Sure enough, a representative assigned from the State Labor Council. The union is very much opposed to making it easier for people to find jobs without going through all these technical hoops and getting permitting. So we will see how those bills come out. But we, Washington Policy Center, made the very common sense point that, similar to the driver's license model, that if a person is qualified and experienced in another state, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to get a job in this state. And the same is true for a young person leaving school. They should be able to get a job easily. One point that I added that I think the representatives hadn't heard before is that Washington's population, for the first time in our history, is starting to flatten out. In fact, there's a good chance that in the next census, we will lose a congressional seat due to lack of population growth. By making it easier to invest and get a job in Washington state, that will solve our problem of net out migration and encourage people in other states to move to Washington, which has been our history. We have been a growing kind of pioneer Western state where people build things, and we're losing that culture and beginning to get more stratified, harder to start a business, get a job, raise a family, and we're really working to turn that around. Another bill which fits on this same theme is what's called the buffer bill. The legislature has tried to pass this for years. It would force farmers to take thousands of acres of land out of production because it's near streams or waterways. A 50-foot buffer as to how close you could farm next to a waterway is reasonable. That's been in place for years. They want to increase that to a 200-foot buffer. Now, this new bill has a complicated mathematical formula having to do with acreage and tree height, so that the farmer never knows exactly how much land he's supposed to preserve. Our point is there's a way to protect waterways, provide habitat for fish, and keep land in production so that food prices stay low. Our point is that if we begin to erode Washington's agricultural base, we will lose that sector of our economy, and it will drive up food prices. So we'll continue to track that. And speaking of prices, Todd Myers on our staff has been in a back and forth with the governor over the last several months about whether the governor's new carbon tax is going to raise the price of gas. Okay, intuitively, you would say the answer is yes. First of all, Todd points out that the purpose of a carbon tax on energy is to discourage the use of energy by driving up the price. But he also has empirical data to back that up. He uses data from the U.S. Energy Information Service, which puts out a report every Monday on prices on the West Coast. And Todd showed a comparison that in Washington state, gas prices have gone up 25 cents a gallon since January 1st, which is when the governor's carbon tax went into effect. Governor Inslee, of course, denies that this is happening. And when prices go up, he blames other factors like the war in Ukraine, for example. Again, Todd comes back with common sense. He's like, I think the war in Ukraine affects all states, not just Washington state. And that doesn't explain why prices are going up so much more here than in other Western states. So we'll continue to stay on that. But that is primarily about accountability. When the governor imposes a massive new tax on energy, and then we begin to live with the effects, we think the public should be informed about why prices are going up. And then lastly, I'll give an update on a great day that we had at the Capitol last Wednesday. Our entire staff was down there for meetings with the legislators. We were invited to speak and present before the House Republican and Senate Republican caucuses. We met with leadership. We touched base with new members. There are many new freshman members have been elected. And then in the evening, we held a legislative reception that was well attended by members and staff and was actually very lighthearted and a lot of fun. The great thing about when our presence in Olympia is we reach out to Democrats, we met with Democrat members as well, is that we're very bipartisan. We are not a lobby organization that shows up with a political agenda. We provide resources and information, and we're available, as I mentioned, to testify on bills. That is a huge sigh of relief for lawmakers. They see us coming and they know that they're not going to be subject to arm twisting and political pressure. Then instead, we're going to argue based on the facts and information about what we think is good for the state. And then I learned some fun facts about the Capitol building. Turns out the lighting was designed by Tiffany. The granite came right here in Washington State. It was the last classical design state capitol in the United States, and that we have the tallest masonry dome in North America. Interesting tourist facts. When I heard that last one about the dome, I thought, well, that must be to contain all the hot air that goes on in here. So it was a great day at the Capitol. We have our, and then looking forward, we have our on the go live Facebook event next Tuesday, January 31st. And then later in March, we have our great events in the desert. We're looking forward to those. More information about that is on our website. And with that, I'll wrap up and I will be back with another update in the future. Thanks.